I was the quiet one, the bookworm, the girl who got good grades but not perfect grades, the one who liked art when my father wanted athletes, the one who asked too many questions, the one who, according to my father, never quite measured up. I want to be clear. He never hit me. There were no bruises, nothing that the outside world could see. But words leave marks too, invisible ones that go much deeper. When I was 8 years old, I came home with a report card, all A's and 1 B. I was so proud. I ran to my father waving that card. He looked at it for 10 seconds, then he put it down and said, "James got straight A's. What happened to you?" I was 8 years old. When I was 12, I won second place in the school art competition. I brought home the ribbon, excited, wanting him to be proud. He said, "Second place means someone was better than you. That's nothing to celebrate." When I was 16, I got into the honors program at school. I told him at dinner, hoping for one moment of pride from him, just one. He nodded and said, "Your cousin Michael got a full scholarship at 16, but good effort." Good effort. Like I was a student in his class, not my daughter. For my entire childhood, I chased my father's approval like I was chasing the horizon, always running, never arriving, always trying, never enough. By the time I left for college, I had made a decision. I was done trying to impress him. I studied graphic design. He wanted me in business. I moved to a different city. He wanted me close to home. I built my own career, my own life, entirely on my own terms. And for the most part, I was happy. Then I met Daniel. Daniel is everything my father told me I didn't deserve. Kind, patient, brilliant. A software engineer who thinks I hung the moon. He laughs at my jokes, reads the books I recommend, and holds my hand when I'm anxious. When he proposed to me on a hiking trail at sunset, I cried so hard I almost forgot to say yes. We planned our wedding for 18 months. It was going to be perfect. A garden venue, 200 guests, fairy lights, live music, everything I'd ever dreamed of. My mother was involved and wonderful. My siblings were happy for me. And my father? My father said he'd come. That alone felt like progress, a small victory. Maybe, I thought, maybe this was our moment. Maybe watching his daughter get married would soften something in him. My mother called me 2 weeks before the wedding, excited. She said, "Emily, your father has been working on a speech. He's been writing it for weeks. I think he's really going to surprise you." My heart swelled. "Really? Really?" she said. "I think this is going to be a turning point." I held on to that hope. I carried it with me through the final weeks of planning, through the dress fittings and the catering decisions and the seating chart battles. My father had written me a speech, a wedding speech. Maybe he was finally going to say it, the thing I'd been waiting to hear my whole life, that he was proud of me. I was 32 years old, and I still wanted my father to say he was proud of me. How young we stay inside when it comes to our parents. The morning of my wedding, I was getting ready with my bridesmaids. Champagne, laughter, happy tears. My mother came in to see me in my dress. She cried. My sister cried. I cried. It was perfect. I should have known the perfection was too good to last. The ceremony was beautiful. Daniel cried when he saw me walk down the aisle. My vows made the front row reach for tissues. The officiant said she'd never seen a couple more clearly meant for each other. I floated through it all like a dream. Then we moved to the reception. Dinner, dancing, toasts. My maid of honor gave a beautiful speech that made everyone laugh and cry. Daniel's best man told a funny story that had the whole room roaring. Then my father stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He picked up his glass. He looked around a room with that smile, the charming, public smile that fooled everyone, and he started talking. He talked about my childhood, he talked about the family, he talked about himself, his business, his values, and his ideas about success. For about 5 minutes, he talked about everything except me. People shifted in their seats. It was a wedding toast, not a TED Talk. Then he paused, he looked at me across the room, and he said this, word for word. I will never forget it as long as I live. Emily was never our easiest child. She was stubborn, impractical, always chasing dreams instead of building something real. When she said she wanted to study art, I told her it was a mistake. When she moved away, I told her she was running from responsibility. When she started this little design business of hers, I told her it wasn't enough. He chuckled. The room was completely silent. Nobody was laughing with him. He continued, I'll be honest, there were times I worried Emily would never figure it out, that she'd float through life without direction, without achievement, without purpose. I watched 200 people's faces, confused, uncomfortable. My mother's face was white. My sister had her hand over her mouth. Daniel's jaw was clenched. His hands were flat on the table. My father raised his glass. But she found Daniel, and I suppose that's something. So here's to Daniel. May he be the stability Emily never managed to find on her own. He drank. 200 people sat in horrified silence. This was my wedding toast from my father on my wedding day. I felt the heat rise in my neck. I felt the tears threatening. I felt the familiar shame spiral starting, the one that had followed me since childhood. And then I stopped. I reached into my purse, and I felt the envelope. I need to tell you about the envelope. 3 years before my wedding, my grandmother passed away, my father's mother, Eleanor Harrison, the most quietly fierce woman I have ever known. She and I had a secret bond that my father never fully understood. While he was busy comparing me to my brother, my grandmother was busy telling me the truth. She used to say, Emily, your father is a man who measures love in achievements. That is his limitation, not yours. In her final weeks, she called me to her bedside, just me. Not my father, not my brother. Me. She held my hand, she looked at me with those sharp, knowing eyes, and she said, I have watched your father treat you unfairly your entire life, and I have something that will matter to you one day. Keep it safe. Use it when the time is right. She gave me a sealed white envelope with my name on it. I asked her what was inside. She smiled. Insurance, she said. She passed away 2 weeks later. I kept that envelope in my safe for 3 years, through dark days when I almost opened it early, through good days when I almost forgot about it. It waited, patient, ready. Now, sitting at my wedding reception with 200 people still frozen in uncomfortable silence after my father's toast, I stood up. My hands were completely steady. I said, Thank you, Dad. That was very honest. Can I respond? My father looked surprised. He nodded, still smiling, still certain he had all the power. I reached into my purse and I pulled out the envelope. I held it up so the room could see it. My father's smile flickered, just slightly, just enough. 3 years ago, I said, Grandma Eleanor gave me this envelope before she passed. She told me to save it for the right moment. Dad, I think this is the right moment. I opened the envelope. Inside were 2 things. The first was a handwritten letter from my grandmother, 3 pages, front and back, in her careful, elegant handwriting. I read it aloud. She wrote about my father's childhood, about how he'd been raised by a harsh, critical grandfather who told him love had to be earned through achievement, about how that wound was passed down, unconsciously, painfully. She wrote about watching me grow up, about how she saw my creativity, my resilience, my quiet strength, how she saw me build a life entirely on my own terms while my father kept moving the goalposts.
She wrote, "Robert, if you are hearing this letter, it means you have done something tonight that you cannot take back. I love you, my son, but you have a wound that you keep giving to your daughter, and she does not deserve it. She never did. Emily is not your failure. She is your greatest achievement. She just achieved things you never learned to value." My father's face was unreadable. His eyes were wet. But it was the second thing in the envelope that changed everything. It was a document, a legal document. My grandmother had quietly, without telling my father, set up a trust fund in my name alone. She'd been building it for 20 years, selling off jewelry and property and small investments. The amount? $1.4 million, left entirely to me, with a note that said, "For Emily, who was always worth more than she was told." $1.4 million that my father had no idea existed. I looked at my father as the room buzzed and shifted around me. I looked at the man who'd called me a failure in front of 200 people on my wedding day. And I said, calmly, clearly, just loud enough for the room to hear, "I think that's enough speeches for tonight." Then I sat down, took Daniel's hand, and smiled at him. The room erupted, not in chaos, in applause. The aftermath of that moment played out over days and weeks. That night at the reception, my father tried to approach me, twice. Both times I was surrounded by guests, friends, and family, all of whom had witnessed everything. Both times, people stepped in front of him, not aggressively, just physically present, creating space. My aunt took him by the arm. My mother gave him a look I'd never seen her give before. He left early. My wedding continued without him, and it was beautiful. The most beautiful night of my life. Daniel danced with me until midnight. My friends gave speeches that made me laugh until my sides hurt. My grandmother's letter, already passed around among family members who wanted to read it, had shifted something. You could feel it in the room. The next morning, my mother called me. "Emily," she said, "I had no idea about the trust fund. Your grandmother never told me." "I know, Mom." "Your father is in shock. He wants to apologize." I took a long breath. "I know he does. Tell him I'll call him when I'm ready, not before." My mother started crying. She said, "I'm sorry I didn't protect you better all those years. I saw what he did, and I told myself he meant well. I told myself it was just his way." "Mom," I said gently, "I know. We'll talk about that too, when I'm ready." My brother James called next. He was quiet for a long time before he spoke. He said, "Emmy, I knew Dad was hard on you, but I never said anything. I thought it was just how he was. I'm sorry. I should have said something." Claire called and just cried on the phone for 10 minutes. She kept saying, "You deserved better. You always deserved better." Word about the wedding spread fast through our family. Extended relatives, aunts and uncles and cousins reached out one by one. Most of them said the same thing, that they'd always felt uncomfortable with how my father spoke about me, that they'd never known how to address it, that they were sorry. My father didn't call for 2 weeks. When he finally did, his voice was different, smaller, quieter in a way I'd never heard before. "Emily." "Dad." Long silence. "I owe you an apology that I don't know how to give," he said. "I've been sitting with what happened, and I keep asking myself when it started, when I started doing that to you." I didn't fill the silence for him. I let him sit in it. He said, "My father was the same way with me. I promised myself I'd never be like him, and I became him anyway." "I know, Dad." He started crying. Actually crying. My father, Robert Harrison, who I had never once seen cry, was crying on the phone. "It doesn't excuse anything," he said. "I know that. I just want you to know that watching you that night, sitting there with that envelope, so calm, so dignified, so certain of yourself, Emily, that's when I realized you never needed my approval. You never needed me to tell you you were good enough." He paused. "You always were." I held the phone and let the silence stretch between us. Finally, I said, "I know, Dad. I've known for a while now." That was 3 months ago. My father and I are not suddenly fixed. Childhood wounds don't heal in a single conversation. But something shifted. A door opened that had been locked my entire life. He started therapy 2 weeks after the wedding. My mother told me quietly, like it was a fragile, precious thing she didn't want to break by talking too loudly. Last month, he came to our house for dinner, just him and my mother. He sat at our table and looked at the photos on our walls, photos of Daniel and me traveling, laughing, living. He said, "You built something real, Emily." I looked at him. "Yeah, Dad, I did." He nodded. "Without my help." I let that sit. He said, "I'm sorry it took me this long to see it." I didn't tell him it was okay, because it wasn't. Not fully. Maybe not ever. But I said, "I see that you're trying, and I appreciate that." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a beginning. So what do I want you to take away from this story? Not revenge. That's not what the envelope was. It wasn't revenge. It was the truth. My grandmother knew her son. She knew what he was capable of. She knew there might come a moment when I needed to be reminded of my worth, when the people around me needed to see it too. She gave me that gift years before I needed it, because she loved me the way a parent is supposed to love a child. Unconditionally, fiercely, without conditions or comparisons. For everyone listening who has a parent like my father, who has spent their whole life running towards someone who keeps moving the goalposts, I want to say this: you are not the sum of their opinion of you. You never were. The people who are hardest to love are usually the ones who never learned how to love properly. That doesn't make their cruelty okay, but it does mean their cruelty was never really about you. It was always about them. And here's what I know now that I didn't know at 8 years old, standing in front of my father, waving a report card with 1B on it. I was always enough. I was always more than enough. It just took an envelope from a wise old woman who loved me to remind the room. My name is Emily Harrison, now Emily Harrison Cole. I own a successful graphic design firm. I have an incredible husband who chooses me every single day. I have a grandmother who loved me so much she spent 20 years building me a safety net she never told me about. And I have a father who is, slowly, painfully, imperfectly, learning to be better. That's not a perfect ending. Life doesn't have those. But it's a real one. And real is so much better than perfect. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment. I read every single one. And if someone in your life has ever made you feel like you weren't enough, I want you to hear this directly. They were wrong. They were always wrong. Thanks for watching.